I'm going to just pass the mic and have each of the individuals introduce themselves, give just a little bit of your background, what you did, like what you were in the Army or Navy or whatever, where you were stationed, and then just pass the mic on. And then I'll come back and we'll start over again with giving some of the experiences that you had. We'll start with you. You don't have to stand.
No, my name is Ralph Carter, and I was in the Marine Corps from 1943 to 1946. I was joined in Chicago. I was working in a defense plant, so I had a deferment, and I went down to join up because we lost our contract in the defense plant. So I was there going through all the inspections and stuff for the military, you know, and there was a Marine a recruiter sitting there. I said, I want to get the Marines. He got me going into the Navy. He says, well, let's see. He looked at me and he says, well, how about I got a man that, in the group for today that had to go to Great Lakes with appendicitis. You want to take his place? You leave tomorrow morning for San Diego. That's the way I got in the Marines. I got home, told my dad I was going in the Marines. He says, well, only they want men in the Marines. I was weighing about 114 pounds at that time. And I said, come on down to the train tomorrow and see. I went off to San Diego. And of course, the fellas that go through the Marines at, what is it called? Some kind of island, Paris Island. They believe they're the only Marines. So we were called Hollywood Marines because we went through boot camp at San Diego. And I could tell you a lot of other stories about that, but we'll pass it on. Ralph.
I'm another Ralph Waite, and was born in April of 1926. Turned 18 in April of 1944, and we were a sleepy little village here in Medina back in the early 40s when the war started. I can remember vividly when Pearl Harbor happened, and immediately at school the next day everybody was talking about what was going on and so forth. And immediately from the class of probably 1942, 41 or 42, there were 6 or 7 of our classmates that decided they weren't going to be drafted. They were going to go into Cleveland and enlist in the Air Force or the Navy, anything other than the Army, being a doughboy, because they wanted a dry bed every night. So if you're in the Navy, why, you got a hammock or something to sleep in, and Air Force, well, of course, they have the best of everything. But a lot of interesting things happened in Medina before our troops started leaving in earnest. And the draft board was run by a group of your friends and neighbors. And so when you got the letter, your friends and neighbors have selected you, you say, thanks, neighbor, thank you for that. And but immediately a Buckeye Stages bus was in front of the courthouse, and those that were called, there'd be 30 to 40 people a month, go and get on the Buckeye Stages bus in front of the courthouse, go into Cleveland, take your physical. And I got my notice a week later, after my birthday, that I was selected and could go into Cleveland and be physically examined, which we did. And they were real nice because I was going to graduate from Medina High School in a class of 88 people, first week of June. And they gave me until the 20th to get ready to pack my bags and go. So I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana. That's where you went when you were sworn in, and then either to infantry or artillery. And I was fortunate to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina by troop train from Indiana to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina. Took basic training there, came home for a 10-day delay en route to Fort Meade, Maryland, 5 weeks of training there, and then to Port of Embarkation, Camp Shanks, New York. And went overseas December 31st, 1944, and on the Queen Mary, cruise ship, Queen Mary. 15,000 of us on the Queen Mary for a week, and I haven't been on a cruise ship since. But got over in Belgium right after the Battle of the Bulge into the 99th Infantry Division, but I was in the artillery of the Infantry Division, and the 99th Infantry had lost a third of its 15,000 people, either killed, captured, or taken prisoner. So there was a lot of room for 18-year-olds to go into the line there. So I'll say more later.
My name is Wayne Rogers. I was in the Navy from September 42 to the end of the war. And I have to tell you, I was a ball player. I was a 17-year-old ball player for the Philadelphia Athletics at that time down in North Carolina. And we played ball down there for a year of 41 and part of 42. And 6 of us decided that we're going to join the Marines. So we all lived in Cincinnati, and we decided, so September of 42, we went down to the post office, a great big building on Fountain Square down in Cincinnati, and all our offices were up there. We joined the Marines, 6 of us. Well, we started us up the stairs to the 2nd floor, and there's a Navy chief standing there. He said, "Where are you young guys going?" "We're going to join the Marines." He said, "Boy," he said, "that's great." He said, "But could you just give me a minute or two?" We said, "Sure." So we went in his office. Guess what? We all 6 joined the Navy. All 6 of us. And when we got home, everybody said, "Well, you joined the Marines?" "Nope, we're in the Navy." And one of us, Lefty Groves, Tommy Groves, was a pitcher. And Tommy says, "Well, I don't want the Navy Reserve." He says, "That's a duration of 6 months." He said, I want 6 years at regular Navy." So he joined for 6 years. We joined for the duration, and he was killing us every time he came home off leave. He said, "Boy, I wish I'd been in the reserves." But anyhow, I had great training at Great Lakes, Illinois, in cold winter. We almost froze to death. And talking about hammocks, I know we have a couple of guys that broke their arms or broke their wrists, and in the middle of the night they turn over and the hammock go wham, because you had to have it stiff, you know. And so we lost a couple of guys. Gosh. But anyhow, after 16 weeks there in training, they said, "Wayne, you're going down to Miami University, Oxford, Ohio, for radio school. You'd be a good radio man." I said, "I would? Yeah, you'd be a good radio man." So anyhow, I went to Miami University, which I loved because it was right near Cincinnati, and for radio school. And then I joined I never sang before, but I joined the Glee Club there because if you join the Glee Club, you get to go weekends at Liberty. So I wanted to go to Cincinnati every weekend, so I got home every weekend. I was at Miami. It was only 27 miles from Cincinnati. So I got home, and then after I graduated from my radio school, they said, "Wayne, we need aviation radiomen." And I said, "Okay." So they sent me to the University of Tennessee. And I'm telling you, that was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. I don't know whenever you guys remember, and you older people remember Clyde McCoy. He was stationed there with us. And every night it was so hot down there. Oh, man, it was the summertime. And he'd come out with his bugle and play songs for us all night long. We'd sleep up on the side of the hill because the moon was shining and it'd be 100 degrees. And we couldn't go to sleep in the barracks because it was so hot. And he played all for us all night long. But anyhow, then I was getting ready to graduate after radio school. I was an aviation radioman then. And Lieutenant Rogers, by the same name I had, he asked, there was 52 of us in school. And he said, "We need half of you guys to go to Naval Air Station in Norfolk, Virginia. And we said, what will we do there?" And Lieutenant Rogers says, "ABATU, aviation transport. You'll be flying supplies in North Africa. They're fighting in North Africa." I said, "Oh boy, that's me. I love to fly supplies in North Africa." So anyhow, I volunteered, and that was the best. They say don't volunteer, but that was the best volunteer I ever made. We got to Norfolk, but it was a training, another training unit, and we were called an S&R squadron, search and repair, rescue, and search and service and repair. So we did both things, and so we fixed planes coming in from the. Oh boy, we had a terrible time. But anyhow, I wanted to tell you a couple of things that I can remember. In fact, I still dream about them. When they practiced landing in Normandy, on the southwest corner of England, 2 weeks before Normandy, 300,000 men, and then practicing on Sunday afternoon. And we had ships out there. We had airplanes guarding us. I was one of the airplanes. Make sure that German subs didn't get in there and see us landing. And I have to tell you, not a real bad storm, but a storm came up, and the waves, wind started blowing. The waves are high as the ceiling here. And as the guys got out of their landing ship tanks with their guns and ammunition and food, as if they were landing in Normandy, they were heavily loaded, over 100 pounds. The waves would knock them down, and their buddies would try to pick them up, and they would get knocked down. And guess how many died in about an hour and a half? Practicing. 900 men. Did you ever hear that before? You probably never heard it before. I don't know. But 900 men died in the practice out of 300,000, and they quit after an hour and a half. They could see that they were in trouble. But I had to tell you that, and I have to tell you about. I'm lucky to be here because I told you about 26 of us went to Norfolk, and 26 went to San Diego, California, and joined the TBF squadron. That was murder. They called it the Widower. It was a real slow plane that dropped torpedoes. TBF, Torpedo Bomber Fighter. And they were flying slow over the water to drop their torpedo at a Japanese ship. And when they went up over the ship, they knocked them out of the sky. We lost all my buddies. 26 men died in TBF squadron in the Pacific. So I was lucky that I didn't go there with them. I'm glad I volunteered. And another thing happened to us. One time we knew a squadron of B-24s was coming in from North Africa for service and repair. They had I don't say how some of them were flying, and we had to repair them. And we put all new equipment in them, all new equipment. But as they came in and landed, a hurricane came up the coast, and we lost some planes before. I had to tell you about the first hurricane. Admiral Ingram didn't move his plane. We went out and we tied him down with the boards and rope. Took two guys to tie the rope in the runways, and we thought, boy, the hurricane wasn't going to hurt us. Well, we woke up in the barracks the next morning, walked over to the air station. We looked around for our planes, and there was about half of them missing. What happened to our airplane? We looked out in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, right there at Norfolk Naval Air Station, and they were up. The tails were up in the air, and the wings were up in the air. The wind was so powerful, it broke those ropes and landed the planes out in the ocean. Well, the next hurricane came. It seemed like we had one every year, but next year hurricane came. Everyone said, everybody's getting out of here now. All our planes are leaving. Well, we just had that squadron come in from North Africa, so we knew they were in bad shape. So, but I caught the worst one, I think. I caught a bad. I got with a PBY from North Africa, and needed everything. We got up in the air. We started flying about. We're supposed to go around the hurricane to Florida, and I got up in the sky, and we could see that the airplane shouldn't even been in the air. We couldn't fly it. And I radioed back to Norfolk and said, please, we want to return. They said, no way. Admiral Ingram said, if you're going to land, you're going to land in Florida. And it was nighttime, and you know the coast was dark. There was no lights. And we lost the generators. We lost the radio. We lost the radar. We lost all our hydraulic system. We were flying with engines only. That's all we had and two engines. And we didn't know how fast we were going or anything. And so the pilot, he was a great guy. He was a lieutenant junior grade. And he said, you guys look out the window now. Make sure another plane don't run into us or we don't run into a plane. And he says, and look out. He said, after we've been flying about 3 hours, he said, we should be around Florida somewhere at my speed. And so I happened to look out the window, and it's about the size of a postage stamp. I saw a plane come in and land and lights go off. Another plane come in and lights go off. I thought, oh boy, there's an airport down there, and I told the pilot. So we come in low, and made circles, and they tried to call us, and they knew we were in trouble because we could not get the wheels down. We lost our hydraulic fluid. There's a way to take the wheels down. I was back there trying to help manually put the wheels down. We couldn't do it. But anyhow, this was about midnight. And we come in too fast the first time. The guy, they had, I tell you, they foamed the runways, and they put fire engines on both sides of the runway to protect us. And we come in too fast the first time. The guy had lights on his arms, and he said, no. He said, go back up. So the pilot knew he was going too fast. So we come in, and I thought we were going too slow. But we came in real low, and he dropped his arms. That means land. So we landed at one end of the runway right on our belly. And I'm telling you, the foam, even though the sparks were about 20 or 30 feet high, I could see them out my window. Oh, the sparks were flying like mad. We were skidding on our belly, and belly came right up to us. And the pilot yelled at us. He said, now, as soon as we stop, he says, jump because it's going to blow up. So we went down, we were lucky. It was Miami. It was Miami Air Force where we were. So we skidded down the runway about a mile, the longest runway on the East Coast at that time, 1 mile. And we skidded right through the fence at the end, and it stopped. And we all jumped out. I jumped out the top of jumped across the wing and jumped off the wing. And only one of us were hurt, and that was the navigator. He broke his leg. But the pilot, for saving us all, he was full, you know. So anyhow, that's one experience I had. And I like to forget some of the other ones, but I can't. But I think I've talked enough. I'll turn it over to the next guy.
Thank you. I was born 1923, Franklyn, Hazel, in Valley City. And I was drafted in 1943. But I just want to recall something about Florida and hurricanes. A hurricane came up down there when I was stationed in Venice. You know where Venice is? Just north of Miami there. And they said, get these airplanes out of here right now. So I jumped in one, and I had to jump in 251s before I get one started. And they said, go up and meet a squadron that's in formation. So didn't give us no information of where to go or nothing. So we got going, and I was up and looking around, couldn't find anybody. And finally, way up north, I found a spot of 51 going. I floored it, you know, and went up there and meet them. And we flew up to Meridian, Mississippi. But before we got there, we run into a big storm. Had to fly right between the tower and the courthouse there. The storm was so doggone low, and we finally went up to Alabama and then headed west and ended up in Meridian, Mississippi. And by God, when we was going that way, the sun was just setting. And before we got there, boy, I said, hey, land in a strange airport and everything else is kind of scary. Well, anyway, the sun was set, and the pilot roamed up, hey, we're not going to make a standard landing. We're just going to peel off at the end of it and run. Well, I got down on the ground, couldn't see nothing. Finally, a Jeep come up in front of me and followed me. So I pulled around and parked it, and guess what? I parked my little old 51 right next to a P-47. Which my brother flew, and he was in the service, and he's 4 years older than I am. But I will get to the start of my experiences in the service. I was drafted in 1943. Went to Columbus, and the second day they give us a test. There was 5 of us late going in to get the test. Well, when we walked in the door, big old sergeant was there, yapping his mouth off and spitting on us while he was giving us the hell. Anyway, went in there, I was shaking, beat heck, and I never even finished the test. I must have got such a low grade that I ended up on a troop train. We ended up in Vancouver, Washington to take our basic. And I'm telling you, that outfit was about as dumb as I was, because there were about half of them were from Cleveland and a few of them from Kentucky. And I mean, I was never with a bunch of people that was absolutely you could not get along with. I mean, them Cleveland kids were, and they found out I was just not a farmer boy. They picked on me to, in fact, on the troop train going out there, I enjoyed the sights going out. Anyway, I finally got wise and sat right next to the latrine there in the train, because you could not go down the aisle and get out and go, because they were shooting crap in the aisle all the time. I mean, I'll explain later. I mean, it was terrible. We went up to basic up there, and we must have probably a month up there. And they shipped us out, and we went down to San Francisco. They backed the train in somewheres in a godforsaken place. There was no trees, there was no nothing, but there was a little water on the right side. The next day we woke up and went up, I got out of the train, went up there and we had 3 rows of tents. We slept in tents. Well, didn't know what we was doing. Finally, a couple of days later, a boat pulled in along the dock there, along the ship. And then about a couple of days later, a train backed in her with a load of bombs. Well, that was our job. Labor battalion, just loading bombs. We worked 12 hours and off 24. I mean, and you know what they gave me to do? The sergeant handed me a sledgehammer. You go in the boxcar and knock all the blocking out and roll the bombs in the middle so these guys can come up and pick them up with their pickle or their train and take them down so they could put them in the boat, pick them up on the cable. Am I holding it too close?
Yeah, I think it's
okay,
no
okay. Maybe I'll just throw this
that's
away.
okay. Go ahead.
Okay,
Just keep it by your-
okay. But no, it was absolutely just nothing but a labor battalion, and the people we had there, the kids, the soldiers, they were just, you couldn't get along without them. In fact, we slept in tents. We ate at picnic tables in the building, 4 at each side. In the morning, we got cereal in the little boxes, cereal each side, and they put so many jugs of milk in the box. If you set the last one there, you was lucky to get any milk to put in your cereal. I mean, that's what I was living with. But anyway, eating out of our mess kit, the steel ones, and you couldn't drink the hot coffee with that tin cup that they had. I mean, that was, forget it. But, well, I was there for 9 months, loading boats. Finally, they shipped us down to Camp Stoneman in San Diego. They was going to ship us out. Well, we was there a week and we got shipped back to where we left. And couldn't figure out why, and I never found out why until after the war. It was at a colored battalion just up the bay from us. Was doing the same thing we were, and they blew the whole place up. And I don't know how many they killed, but that was the trouble of the war. Things went on that you didn't even get to know what was going on. But it was just happened to 3 of us one time. Went to San Francisco. That's where we went to get, a little bit drunk, a little bit. That's the only thing we could do, really. But we went back to theater. It was said, sign, join the cadets, be a pilot. So one of them said, let's sign. Oh, forget it. But we signed up. By golly, it wasn't long that the sergeants got a notice to send us in to take a written test. Well, took the test first for your health, see if your body was all right. But then like 2 of us passed that, we went back the next week for our test. And there's where I gotta give credit. There was a girl there who gave us the test. She was half Chinese and half something else, but she was the cutest little thing you ever saw. But she told us how to take the test and what to do. This time when I took a test, I felt good. I wasn't shaking. And I must have passed it because the next week after that, I was going to the Air Force. I went up to college, back up to Washington State, D.C., Washington State, to Ellensburg, Washington, and I'll tell you, from eating from picnic tables for 9 months, we had linens, silverware, plates, the girls waited on. I mean, you can't believe the difference in the service when you get the right outfit. I mean, it makes a difference. And if it wasn't for the sergeants, it was mostly sergeants, old ones that really knew what they were doing, helped me get through because, especially my math, they about ready to close it up. But anyway, I was gone out of the thing, and then I went through my pilot training, and there is nothing like flying, right? Oh man, I mean, you get up there in the air, and I spent a lot of time in the San Joaquin Valley, going up there right next to the big park there, and took my basic, my advanced there, and then we went down to Phoenix, Arizona, and had my advanced training there. And from there, we went on to Lincoln, Nebraska, staging area. And then from there, they shipped me down to Venice, Florida, where I got into my 51s and took my 51 training. But this day, I was in that dumb outfit, loading boats, labor, but I still can say that I did just as much there for the war effort as I did flying a 51 Mustang. But I'll have to say I never did get it to really practice my experience flying because I never got in the war. I was still in my training down there, and they said, "You want to get out?" And that was after I left there for that hurricane come through. I went home and said, "You want to get out?" I said, "I'm gone. Goodbye." I come home and stayed in the reserves for 6 years. Then we had a colonel there that got. I'm too loud, huh?
Just a little too close.
Okay. There was a colonel there that was running the outfit, and he come in one day and says, "Hey, they got me for overage and grade. I'm gone." And that hit me right then. Hey, if they're going to treat a guy like that, I'm leaving too. But I got to say one thing from my brother. He stayed in, and he retired from the Air Force and getting a good pension now and everything else. But I can say that was pretty much my Air Force flying, and I wouldn't have anything. I wouldn't do it over. Really, I enjoyed it. It's something that flying can't be any better, can it? It is. Especially flying in San Joaquin Valley. I was up there flying, and every day you could see groups of sheep, and their shepherd and their 3 dogs in there. You could see about 3 of them, because you could see hundreds of miles from the air like that. But, I mean, the experience was great.
My grandson, after I got back, my grandson said, "Grandpa," he was 8 years old. He said, "Grandpa, how many of those bad guys did you kill during World War II?" And I said, "Nolan, I didn't kill one, but I had a lot to do with a lot of guys that were killed." And he said, "Grandpa, what were you doing? 4 years, what were you doing?" So I thought that was a great thing. But I also wanted to tell you, I was an aviation radioman, and my main thing was flying PBYs, PBMs, PB4Ys, and the Navy called them PB4Ys. That was B-24. That's the one I flew in most of the time, and I hated the Germans because they killed so many of my buddies. I'll tell you, we picked them up out in the ocean. Rescue was something else, but I hated them real bad. And several times they tried to escape. The subs tried to escape by surrendering. And would you believe? The guys on the plane said they lost 3 or 4 guys, and they wouldn't let them surrender. And knocked them out of the water. Not often. That didn't happen often. But we hated the Germans at that time. And when I retired in December of 1945, we had 10,000 German prisoners at Camp Shelton, Virginia, and most of them were submarines. And so we asked the guys, is it true that during the war you guys needed beer off the submarine and had a boat come in, a rowboat come into Virginia Beach and buy beer? And they said, yeah, that's true. We did do that. We had to have our beer. They come in and buy 2 cases of beer and row back to the submarine 2 miles out. Yeah, yeah. Just to get beer. And anyhow, I wanted to say that I was when I was discharged, I was in camp about 5 days, I believe, and the German prisoners there were the nicest guys I ever met. They were glad and happy to be captured by the Americans. They loved it. They couldn't do enough for me. I mean, they thought I was a major or something. I was just an aviation radioman, you know. But they said, can I help you, sir? Can I help you, sir? Can I help you? They couldn't do enough for you. I couldn't. So finally I decided that the Germans weren't such bad people after all. They had to fight just like we did. And I wanted to say, too, that when the war was over, we had, you aren't going to believe this because I don't believe it either. This is what I was told. We had 10,000 planes coming in from Europe, from England, France, Germany, Italy, North Africa, and everywhere. They were coming in, and then we would pick up these 10,000 planes, and brand new ones coming out of the factory. You guys were making planes like mad. And in other words, how many planes do you think were manufactured for the guys in World War II? 10,000. That's why we won the war. Volume won the war. Men, guns, ships, equipment. That's what won the war. You guys won the war back home. I'm sure you did because of your production. You were great.
Let me take you from where the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth were both made in Southampton, Scotland, and we unloaded out in the harbor there because they couldn't get into the harbor. We unloaded into landing craft and then down through England with troop train. The divisions, the 99th, the 76th, and there was another one. Each division. I'm not bad on.
Playing with the sound.
Okay. So about 5,000 of us went to each division, and when we were accepted into A Battery, B Battery, C Battery, Charlie Battery, Dog, and so forth, the guys that had survived the Battle of the Bulge, which was a tremendous bad weather, took each one of us 18-year-old kids aside and said, you know, we don't know what you were taught in the States, but this is the real war, kid. Very good. We'll go from here. But on the line, the winter was severe. A lot of us had trouble with frostbite as far as feet were concerned, and that was my next excursion back to General Hospital in Paris for 2 or 3 weeks with pneumonia and frozen feet. And then my biggest concern was getting back to my line outfit. And by this time, it's into March of 45. By this time, the Germans are really out of desire, out of petrol for their planes and vehicles and so forth, and out of food. And our biggest problem toward the end of March was what to do with all of the German prisoners that were coming back towards, and the whole difference in World War I and World War II, and and battled it since, you knew where the enemy was, and you had a staging area in back where your supplies could come up to the line outfits. So we just, as the Germans threw their weapons and things in the ditch, put a white flag around their arm, kept them going on back. And from that point in March, we were across the Rhine by then, and transferred from the 1st Army up north to Patton's 3rd down in southern Germany. And the war, for all practical purposes, was over with VE Day then. And we were assigned occupation duty in southern Germany, a little town by the name of Volkach, Germany, which was way down by Munich. And we were there until about the first week of July of '45. Suddenly, they called all of us 18 or 19-year-olds in and said, you're all going to be sent back to the States. You're going to have a 30-day furlough, and so lots of luck. The manner in which troops were dispersed was a very fair thing after World War II with 16 million people. But our purpose in coming back was to be moved out of the 99th Infantry into the 4th Infantry Division because the invasion of Japan was to take place in November of 1945. With VJ Day happening, of course, that was all unnecessary. So we were sent to Fort Benning, North Carolina, or Fort Benning, Georgia, and we were down there for 5.5 months waiting to get discharged. But the manner in which they discharged you, you got 1 point for every service that you were in stateside, 2 points for every month overseas. The main battles for each worth campaign worth 5 points. And I don't remember what a wife and children were worth, but basically the guys that went in the 41, 42, 43 got out before those of us that went in 44, which was the fair way to do it. And so that was the way we ended up being discharged in May of 1946. I'd like to make a comment, though, about the greatest generation is always being mentioned. And the greatest generation wasn't only in the military. The greatest generation was doing what Wayne was talking about, producing things 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Any company like the Permo Company, which was here in Medina, making aluminum parts, they could fly. If they exceeded their quota, they would get the government E banner to fly underneath their flag. And rationing, the things that were rationed during World War II, everybody had their ration books. When you went in the service, you had to turn your ration books in. But all of the support, the production of war material for the Atlantic Theater and the Pacific Theater was tremendous, and our country could never repeat again with the loss of factories like we've had today, putting enough things together for the war effort going 2 directions. The war bonds and war stamps that were sold in high schools here in Medina County, the classes would compete against one another to sell war bonds and stamps, and that was a manner of financing, which was a fair way to do it. But all of those things, and also high school students, those of you that are here from Buckeye High School here, and I admire you, the way you attend our roundtables here, going out and collecting scrap metal, steel, aluminum, pots and pans for the war effort, all of the things that were in short demand. School students played a big part with the sale of war bonds and stamps, collecting scrap metal, that type of thing to support the war effort. Also, teachers in high schools knew that their students were going into a battle, were going into war. And Miss Florence Phillips was a history teacher at Medina High School here, and she made all of us subscribe to Time magazine to enlighten us and to start us thinking of the things that were going on in the war. So war effort was solidly supported by the home front, and the display of the blue stars in the windows, the little banners, and when that blue star turned to a gold, that's where the Gold Star Mothers came from, and they were a big part of the war effort also, selling as they lost their son or their husband or brother. Those gold stars kept appearing in the windows. So other things too, like an honor roll. Every township in Medina County had an honor roll. Ours, Medina City and Montville Township, was up on the north wall on Washington Street by across from First Merit Bank. That whole wall was filled with an honor roll, and all of those names were on there. Gold Star, those that were killed were gold stars on there. So it was a good war effort.
These fellas talked a lot about the Air Force. Reminded me of a story. My brother was flying DC-3 or C-47, they might have called them then. And they flew across from Florida all the way across up through the islands and up through Portugal over to England. But when he landed in England, a guy come out to guide him in, and he says, "You got a second ticky in the kite with you?" He said, "Where did I land?" This guy, what is he talking? He meant as your co-pilot with you, you have him come in and would guide you over to a parking place. But that's the kind of language he had. And when I heard that, I had a laugh too to see what kind of language we were talking. They fellas, most of them talked to Air Force their airplanes. And what you were saying is another thing you might not know, but I was a mechanic on Corsairs. That was the Navy and Marine Corps' best fighter in the Pacific. And they were made right here in Akron, Ohio. Over 1,000 of them came out of here. I went through Naval Air Technical Training Center, Norman, Oklahoma, to be an aircraft mechanic. And then I went to Pratt & Whitney Aircraft School. And when I got out to the West Coast again, they needed men. They didn't need airplane mechanics. So they put me in the infantry where we had amphibious tanks, which had aircraft engines in them. So I got to be in an amphibious tank outfit and was shipped overseas. And when I got overseas, they said they needed people for amphibious trucks. That was made by General Motors, and we didn't have any General Motors equipment in the Marine Corps, so we had to go to the Army and learn how to service them and work with them. And that was quite of an experience. I cut my hand one day and had to go to sick bay. And the nurse says, "What's your serial number?" I said, 882591. "How long you been in the Army?" she said. "Everybody's got 12 numbers and you only got 8. I said, "I'm not in the Army." I told her the situation. "Okay, we'll take care of you." But that was quite a funny experience too. But we ended up on Guam with the Stuck outfit, unloading ships with gasoline for the B-29s before they had any pipelines up there and all. So we were unloading 12 barrels, 55-gallon barrels at a time on a duck. And going into the landing, pulling up on the road, take them up, unload, and go back and get another load. Sometimes we worked 24 hours a day to keep the gas up there. So that was quite an experience too. And little side things that you might like. I was only a corporal. My brothers were, and I had 4 brothers in. This fellow was going to talk tonight. I had 6 brothers, but I had 4 brothers in, all in a different branch to service. And they were, 2 of them were officers and the other one was a sergeant. And they were sending home for money, and I'm sending money home all the time. My dad said, "What are you doing out there?" What happened is we were allowed to go unload the ships, and we'd open the petcocks on the ducks, and we'd fish, get big fish like this, and the natives weren't allowed to go outside the reef. So we'd go up to the natives, sell the fish to them, and they'd give us their alcohol that they made out of coconuts. And I was selling that for $40 a gallon. So I was sending money home. So, you know, you got to keep an eye open for any kind of a job you can get.
So he said, I was hoping he wouldn't call me. I was sitting there sweating. We were up high, and I hope he didn't call me because I'd never been up in an airplane before. But the pilot knew I was new. He said, "Raymond?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "Get me a bearing on WTAR Norfolk, Virginia, right now." I said, "Yes, sir." I said, boy, I jumped up and I started working on that loop antenna that had up there, you know, and you had to go through 3 or 4 steps before you got to 0. When you got to 0, that was the reading. That was the location. So anyhow, every time I get to 0, the needle just kept on going. And holy smoke, and I couldn't stop it from going. And I finally sat down and I hope he didn't call me. And he called me. He said, "Raymond?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "What is that rating you got on WTAR Norfolk, Virginia?" I said, "Sir, we got a malfunction on our direction finder." And he laughed at me, and he came back and he said, "You know what? While you were getting that reading, I was flying in a circle." He said, "You're supposed to fly in a straight line." I said, "I was flying in a circle." I said, I knew you wouldn't get a reading on it." So that's one thing that happened to me I thought was really funny. Oh, I wanted to tell you, too. I used to fly the SPD dive bomber. And boy, the pilots from Langley Field over in Virginia, Langley Field, Virginia, would come over on Sunday morning and want a dogfight with the Navy pilots. You know, practice dogfighting up in the air. So here they come one Sunday morning, and the pilot says, "Wayne, you jump in that, you'll be the radio man on this SPD bomber." So we're flying up there, and you know what they do? They get on each other's tail, and they try to shoot, they act like they're shooting them down, you know. And so they do barrel rolls and spins and everything, and I got sick. Boy, did I get sick. And I had those little flat hats on, you know, little wool cap. And you're supposed to, if you get sick, you're supposed to take your cap off and bump it in the cap. Well, I didn't know it. We were flying upside down. I took the cap down here, and man, they went up and hit the top of the plane and bounced off, you know, made a terrible mess. So when we got back down, the pilot said, he got a hose for me. He said, "Radioman, to clean out that damn plane."
I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our honors flight from here. I was chosen, I guess you say, but anybody from World War II can go on this honors flight to Washington, D.C. We left here at Cleveland Airport 4:30 in the morning. There was about 80 of us all together, yet there was some civilians on the plane too. We went with Southwest Airlines. And we flew out of here we got out of here by about 8:30 and flew to Baltimore. We got to Baltimore and we got off and started up to go to buses. We took buses from Baltimore to Washington, D.C. And on the way up, there was a lot of high school bands and high school glee clubs singing beautiful songs, U.S. songs, you know, for the veterans. And it was the most, I'll never forget how well they treated us and respected us and all. And everybody, "Thank you for your service, thank you for your service." I don't know, I said I was drafted. I don't know about thanking me for my service. But anyway, it was a great thing. Then we got into Washington, D.C. We had some American Legion guys leading it on motorcycles to take the buses into Washington, D.C. And we started making the different monuments. We went to, I guess we went to the Vietnam Wall first. Then we went to the one about Korea. And then we went from there to the Marine one where they're raising your flag at Iwo Jima. That was an interesting thing that I never knew, and I don't know if you people know it, but there's 5 people raising that flag, and there's 11 hands on the post. And I said, go on. No, the guy that designed it, he says I had to put the extra hand, that's God's hand, helping raise that flag. And that was really something I could never thought of. Then we went from there across, I'd say across, but we had to go way around to get to Arlington Cemetery. And we had to saw the changing of the guard. And my brother and his wife are buried at Arlington. I asked the bus driver, could he go by there? He said, well, I got to follow that Jeep. I'm not allowed to go anywhere but where that Jeep's taking me. So I didn't get to go, but my grandson works in Washington, and he went over and put some stones, what you do on the cemetery where my brother and his wife are. And there was an interesting thing there when I was to see his burial. A fella next to him, it said he was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. And then down below, he says he's a lieutenant commander of the U.S. Navy. I said, how can a guy get from a sergeant in the Marine Corps to lieutenant commander of the Navy? Then it said Reverend. So he was a chaplain. After he got out, he went to school and became a chaplain, and went back in the Navy and became a lieutenant commander. And that was the answer, but that was quite a thing to see. A few other things we can catch up on. I got a few minutes. We had a good meal while we were in Washington then, and we got back to Baltimore to fly back home, and there was a little delay, but we got in here about 10 o'clock that night, and I was 87, and the oldest guy with us was 95. So, and everybody gets a pusher. Everybody rides in a wheelchair. You're not allowed to walk, and somebody pushes you all around. I had an experience there at the monument, World War II monument, where we spent most of our time. Some young kids wanted to, they come up and said, can we take your picture? Are you a World War II veteran? I said, yeah. So they took our picture, and they were high school kids on vacation, I guess. And one of them said, or I asked them, where are you from? They said, Kansas City, Missouri. Oh, I said, we're from Cleveland. Oh, the girl says, my dad and mother were raised in Cleveland. So it's a small world. And that was an interesting thing. Then they wanted pictures of us to take home and show people what they saw there.
You mentioned when you cut your hand, you went to sick bay. You cut your hand and went to sick bay. I'm a Paris Island Marine. We didn't have sick bay. What the hell is that?
You know that was worse back 70 years ago.
One night, we loaded 10 B-24s. We call them PB-4Ys, but they're B-24s, you know, Army. We loaded them down with, they were going to North Africa, and they were supposed to land in the Azores, and we loaded them down with ammunition, guns, all kind of equipment, food, everything. Their bellies were almost on the runway, and when they went off, just before dark, they just barely made it off out of the water. So we knew, guess what happened? They didn't have enough. They had too much load and not enough gas to get to the Azores. We were going to the Azores, and so they started throwing stuff out: ammunition, guns, equipment, food, everything. Throwing food, trying to have enough, because they could see by the distance that they didn't have enough gun. Well, anyhow, out of the 10 planes that took off with loaded down, 2 of them made the Azores. 2 out of 10. Now, what's the Navy doing sending the B-24s loaded down like that at night? Anyhow, they loaded, a lot of them landed in the water near the Azores, and the Azores were looking for us, and they sent out patrol planes to pick guys up out of the water. And we didn't lose very many men, but we lost 8 B-24s in the water. Can you imagine sending anything out like that at nighttime? No lights, no nothing. Unbelievable.
Have any other questions? You know, it's kind of funny. I just end this program today. These gentlemen were all involved in something that took place over 60 years ago, closer to 70. I was at Pearl Harbor this last December 6th, the 69th anniversary, and there had to be 10,000 people there on that particular day, and everybody, you know, the military and every survivors were all underneath the tent. It was the most moving experience I have ever had, and I was just on the peripheral. I didn't even get a chance to get close to anything, but it was, you know, one of the more moving things. Every time we have these programs, the first thing I always think of is that these guys and women were 18, 19 years old. They were just kids, and they had total responsibility for all these things. And just today, the military had some other kids that just pulled off one of the more fascinating things, or the most courageous things in our last decade. And it's like, you know, it's like there's a straight line from these guys all the way to those Rangers and SEALs and all those people. Just really something to be proud of, you know, tenacious, persistence, never give up. So, and I want to thank you guys. This was one of the best ones I ever had. So thank you very, very much.